Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. And my brother-in-arms is back amongst a very busy schedule. How are you, sir?
I'm glad to be back. I've been having massive FOMO, not being able to be part of the last couple of interviews, and they sounded wonderful. I can't wait to hear them when they come out, because as we record this, they haven't been released yet. But, David, I'm glad to be back.
Yes, and it's good to be back with Mr. Robbie Gennet. So, as you'll hear, we cover quite a bit of ground with Robbie as always. He's undertaken the ambitious task this year of releasing 10 albums in 1 year. We definitely talk about that, let alone his career as a touring musician and as an educator too, that we do have a lot of interesting chats about educating and notation versus by ear and all sorts of interesting stuff as well. So no, it was a pleasure talking with Robbie. I'll let you listen to him and we'll talk to you after the show. Robbie, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I thought we'd kick off. You've got one hell of a year coming up, Robbie. You've announced that you've I'd call it a creative tsunami of releasing 10 albums this year. So I know one of them's already out and we've had a listen to that and it's great. So tell us a little bit about what you've got planned for this year.
So I recorded all of this music about 6 years ago. My house had burned down in a fire, which was tricky. I lost my instruments, a lot of my previous art and memorabilia and all that, my studio space and all that. And then the pandemic lockdown soon after. It's kind of a 1-2 punch. So in this period of turmoil, trying to get back home and then being locked down to home, I had a lot of time to reflect and focus. And I was working with very minimal tools, but my creative juices were flowing, and I just started writing all these songs and recording them as I went, not even thinking I was going to release these, just recording them for my own purposes. They were like my soundtrack to dealing with all of this. And as time went by and I got to this past year, I decided that I was going to release all this music. Why? Because all of these songs are done. They're my songwriting and performances and whatnot. I could have waited to get into some big studio like back in the day. We all have that mentality, but honestly, I feel these are great representations of my songs. I like to produce myself because then if I want the bass up, I put the bass up. I'm getting my version of me, if you will. A lot of times with producers, they'll get their version of you rather than a better version of your version of you. So we work through that. But as I put these songs together in the structure of albums, which is the era that, I grew up in, it just felt right. And actually I've been watching a lot of clips from Rubin, and I'd read his book on creativity, and it really spurred me to say, why hold back? Why not do this? Why not just go for it? And so I'm 2 albums into a 10 album roll. And that's actually leading to another project that I had started work on right before the fire in a studio. So it's like all of this happened after that and it's leading up to that. So it's a interesting flip flop, but really why hold back nowadays, right? Why hold back anything?
That's right. So I'm fascinated you mentioned Rubin's book. And if you look over one of my shoulders, you'll see it actually sitting there. With the grey book there. Yeah. So tell us what you particularly took from that, because Rick is a bit of a Zen sort of guy. He talks very broadly about concepts and so on. So, what did you take from that did help you with this project?
I tell you, the biggest inspiration was, release things. Just put it out and then put the next thing out and then the next thing. And also, really, again, you're doing it for yourself. Other people are going to hear it. Other people are going to see it. But really, you're creating this for yourself. And all this music I had created for myself. So it really rang true in that respect. And he just kind of gave me the freedom to just say, I'm going to put all this music out and then more music after that. And once I bring these songs to the live stage, that will kind of take it to its natural next step. But I felt like I'm sitting on all these songs. I've written probably have over 800 songs in my catalog, and most haven't been released. And so I decided to remedy that by putting all these albums together. I created all the album art. I recorded everything but about 4 drum tracks. I had a great friend of mine, Michael Jerome, a wonderful drummer, play on a couple tunes I needed, but everything else is me from top to bottom, writing, performing, recording, mixing, did it. And that's why Robbie, my mug says discipline.
Yeah. You're clearly very disciplined and very productive, which I think is a lesson we can all take as musicians, because it can be easy to procrastinate or find reasons not to do things. So I think we really admire this dedication to releasing material.
Every musician has that fear. Every artist probably. Is it good enough? Yeah. What if I release it and nobody cares? Yada, yada. Rick Rubin, just get it out there, just put it out and then put the next thing out. Don't even, while they're looking at that thing, you're already on to the next. I'm fully in that mode and it feels great. And I love these songs. I've been sitting with them for a couple of years and they've been my soundtrack. So now it's very interesting to have other people hearing, songs that were very personal.
Well, that's actually the next thing I wanted to ask you about. So clearly, as you said, the creative process was to some degree driven by a really challenging circumstance of the house not having all the tools and instruments you might have normally had. And clearly that sparked the muse in you to get creative.
Yeah.
As these albums get released, what sort of a journey will we be taken on as a listener to match your process?
Well, there's multiple journeys woven in. One of the things that happens as these albums unfold is the styles change to where by the end of this year, you'll have even less of an idea what to call me, what to label me, how to categorize me. And ultimately, I feel that the greatest artists are categorizable or labelable only by their name. And so when you hear music by David Bowie, is it rock, jazz, cabaret, soul, funk, blues? Yes. So my next record, which comes out in April, there's a song that is the most Steely Dan song I could have ever possibly tried to and achieved to write. It's like I just channeled my Fagin. And that's going to come as a big change to the stuff just before it. And I love that. And then there's a lot of synth-oriented stuff that's coming later. So it's very hard in my mind to tag what it is I'm actually doing. So this journey is for me about not redefining myself or even defining myself. It's about challenging the idea of what actually defines somebody. And so in the lyrics, in the music, there's a lot of things I want people to hear. And I feel like as a lyricist, the people that I aspire to, that I read, that I chew into, the Neil Peart and Bob Dylan and Bernie Taupin, these are the people that I want to be in the realm of. So I take my writing seriously. Sometimes, as you know, with a line, you might go for a rhyme and it changes the whole meaning of the line and you step back and you go, okay, that's great. I didn't even mean that, but there it is. So there's a certain extent to that, but I think the journey is not so much, oh, whoa, what happened to me? It's more about getting through it and coming out on the other side with more than before, so.
Love it. No, that's brilliant. And obviously, I mean, to get to the stage of releasing this amount of material, you've got many years of chops and touring and performance behind you. So I do want to cover that off a little bit. So, I mean, you mentioned before we started recording, you've been to Australia on tour. So let's just talk about a couple. And I'm actually at the end of this segment, Robbie, going to ask you to identify who are highlights for you, because it's easy for us to pick out alleged big names, but they're not always the most memorable playing and performance experiences. But we will start with the big names. So let's talk about your amazing sort of time with Lisa Marie Presley. You sort of around 10 years ago, 10 to 12 years ago. Now, tell us about how that came about and what you learned from that experience.
That was an incredible experience. How it came about, my friend Damon Fox, who was playing keyboards with her, had an opportunity to be a musical director on a TV show with Linda Perry, who he also worked with. So he engaged me as a sub, and it was for less than a month, but I had to rehearse and practice as if I was going out for a year, because it was 2 keyboards on the right, a piano on the left, a sampler where I had to hit the D key at the second bar and sing harmonies. It was, I had my work cut out for me. It was one of those kind of gymnastic gigs. If it was just one keyboard, that would be one thing, but I had to literally do all this crazy stuff. But it was great. And the shows wound up with a performance in Graceland in the Jungle Room, which was filmed, and it was done for Dodge trucks or something like that. It's not online now. I can't find it, and I'm dying to see it again. But we set up in the Jungle Room and I was just hanging out. And then I looked up and there's Priscilla Presley leaning against the wall. It kind of hit me for a moment, the gravity of where I was. And then I just kind of wiped it off. But after all was said and done and we were breaking down, I walked out and I had a nice moment at night alone by Elvis's grave, just to give him my respects and regards. So, these little moments happen because of the music and where you went, but she was a very interesting person to be in her circle and work with. And she treated me very nice, and I have nothing but nice things to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, going from one extreme to the other, Robbie, I mean, Lisa Marie to Everclear is another one I know, a band you've played with. Obviously quite a guitar-driven band, but what was your role there, and what were your learnings?
So much like I played with a band called Seven Mary 3, I played both keyboards and guitar. So I kind of whatever they needed me to do, and I sang a lot of backup harmonies. So with Everclear, I came in, and this is actually, I got a lesson from the Everclear tour. they said to me, learn all the rock stuff. And I had all these different albums of theirs. So I started charting out all the rock stuff. And then they sent me a set list the night before I'm to fly to Portland, had 40 tunes on it, 10 of which I haven't even touched. So I make my charts and I go and I fly and I roll in with my rolly bag to the club. All the equipment's set up. Band's about a half an hour out, right? I go up, the keyboard setup's all set up. Guitars get handed to you. You know, it's nice. You don't have to change a string. So I hit the keyboards, all nice. He goes, yeah, you just switch and the next song comes up. It's beautifully set up. So I hit the guitar and I hit the keyboard and I said, is this guitar tuned down? He goes, yeah, the whole set's tuned down a half step. So now I have 28 to rechart 40 songs a half step down, which on guitar, that's not a problem. On keyboard, that's an entirely different world. And so all that I had done with my teaching and learning, writing my book, The Key of One and whatnot, saved me because I was able to chart 40 songs. Band walks in, hey, how you doing? We start playing and everything went according to plan because of how I had prepared myself for that kind of instance, or for any instance really, but that was the ultimate test. And afterwards I said to myself, all right, now I feel like I've done something professional and, what I do and what I teach and how I'm thinking, it works. So it's a lot of what I taught later on at Musicians Institute to a lot of different musicians, mostly in private counseling because the official music education didn't really have a place for what I was teaching, which was all the stuff that they leave out.
And we're definitely going to cover that off too, Robbie, as well. So, I mean, just on that, I mean, my first go-to with half an hour to go and everything being down half a step is to go for the transpose. But given the complexity of the rig, it's not as easy as just hitting a transpose button. So it's not worth the risk. Yeah.
And people who get used to charts, I mean, they sent me albums that weren't out yet. There were no charts. Yeah. So even if you make charts and you show up with charts, spread out that's not the way to do it. I had a lot of students actually at MI that were very much into charting, and I'm not denigrating charting or notation. But I said, you're going to show up to an audition. There's going to be 10 other people there to play that same role, and none of them are going to have charts. So, the charts are to learn, and then you put them away. So that's where the rubber meets the road. And, when it works, it works. And when it doesn't, you lose the gig.
That's right. No, exactly. And Robbie, so standouts throughout your performance career so I've listed two, but just fascinated on what stood out to you as particularly memorable gigs or people you've worked with, collaborators and so on.
I mean, there is a long list and some of them are one-off things. I got to play with Alan Parsons. One night I got to jam with Robbie Krieger and some of the guys from Little Feat, different things like that. But when I toured with Nick Lachey, when he was a big pop star, we did one of those Christmas shows where they have all the stars of the time. And I played a sold out Madison Square Garden and hung out with Bruce Springsteen. And, it was like, that was one of those nights. I'd say Graceland is another. That was a pretty big moment. But look, when you're out on your first tour and you play, a storied venue for the first time, and some of the venues I played early on, I played CBGB's, I played the Limelight, they're long gone, but dear to my heart.
You mentioned before Key of One, and we'd love to explore the philosophy behind that and what that is for our listeners and viewers. But before we do, Robbie, I'd like to take this right back. We always love to ask all our guests about their musical upbringing and what influenced you right at the start as a young person and your formative years and that journey that got you to where you are today. So if you could share a bit of that with us.
I would say that my parents having an old piano in my house, an acoustic piano, the one I think my dad learned on when he was growing up, not a great piano, but a piano, was the absolute portal to my future because it was not a situation where I was being pushed into lessons or I was going to school for it. I mean, I took lessons from 6 to 14 and then quit, and I'm self-taught. So I just had a love for it. And actually one of the last teachers I had, this guy, Rick, who I still would love to find, and I've never located him again. At the end of each lesson of what he was supposed to teach me, he would teach me some blues or boogie woogie riffs. And then he'd come back the next week and say, so did you do your work? I say, no, but listen. And I do the riff. And at that point, he should have probably just started teaching me every single cool thing he knew and let the rest fly. But long story short, it started my love for boogie woogie and blues piano playing. I also grew up, my parents played a lot of Billy Joel and Elton John. And that at the, as you grow up, those are kind of the 1-2 piano man, rock and roll guys. And you can't help but want to emulate that kind of thing. I also was a huge fan of Rush. I still am. And so that's when I picked up the bass, which is my second main instrument. And, Geddy Lee, bass and keyboards. And then years later, learning that it was actually Neil, the quiet guy on the drums, writing all the words. That band was very, very instrumental. And learning and playing and listening and first rock concert I went to without my parents. First one with my parents was the Bee Gees. So
Wow.
that's another band that was on all the time growing up. And a lot of that music and the sensibilities and the harmonies, I mean, you just cannot help but be swept up in that. So I did not go to college for music, but when I was in college, I was jamming with people. And when I got back, I'd really decided that music was what I wanted to do. And I started my first band and got my first tour and all that kind of stuff after that. But it really was a matter, as I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people, I had no choice. I needed to play music, and it was all I wanted to do. And so here I am.
So tell us about that part of your journey. So as you said, you're at college, you're not studying music, but you're very, music is drawing you to it. You're jamming, you're forming bands. What does that look like for you at the time, and how does that morph into, this is what I'm doing?
I'll tell you, there's a word that I will give you, and to me, it is the ultimate driver of success in any arena, but especially in music, and that is curiosity. So I was a curious musician. So I went to as many concerts as I could when I was in my teenage years, and when I went to college, I did the same thing. I actually had a roommate who was really into heavy metal, and so he had all these different cassettes, and I had a car and he didn't, so I'd drive us to see different bands and stuff like that. And then after college, I just started seeing every band I could. I would, drive around. I lived in Florida, was where I grew up. So I would drive to different cities and see, music. And I knew how to get tickets, stay out in line for tickets for the metal shows. So I'd go get tickets for the Allman Brothers that way and get up in the third row. And, I got to see a lot of people that are no longer with us, but every single time that I saw a show, I needed more. And so playing music, listening to music, jamming with friends, getting with other people who had a love for music and sharing stuff. Good friend of mine, Frank, down in Florida, was a blues guy. Go over to his house and he would just play me all these different types of blues music that, described. I was self-educating. I was an autodidact on every level. And when I was about early 20s, I went to a record store, which they still exist out there, I'm sure. And a guy, Bob Perry, who's still down there in Miami, Blue Note. And I went in and I said, Bob, I need jazz. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I grew up in rock and roll and I don't have any jazz in my life. And I know it's really important music and there's all these luminaries and stuff, but it's like an ocean and I don't know where to dip my foot in. He said, well, what do you think of when you think of jazz? So, a guy with the saxophone in a dark, smoky club. I mean, I had no reference at all. He said, well, I'll put something on, walk around, let me know what you think. I came back up. I loved it. It was Kind of Blue, which is a great entry-level album for people. So I took that home and then I started to, you branch out from there and like, oh, I really like Paul Chambers. And then you find him on the Roy Haynes record, you do that. But also around that time, I got into really hard the Crusaders and a band called Stuff out of New York. And both of those bands were doing session work, tons of session work. So I started branching out in the jazz, funk, soul, 70s, 80s era. To all that stuff, just following Richard T and following Joe Sample and following, Eric Gale, and started to find other records. And now I have, a huge album collection and, I have kind of a phonogenic memory. So everything I've ever heard is really accessible in my mind.
Yeah. Wow.
So
and that probably applies really well, Robbie. I mean, you've given some great insights into your upbringing and you mentioned before about lessons. So let's talk a little bit about Kia One and the website and the book and so on. So I know it's hard to encapsulate, but just your broad philosophy on teaching someone to learn music.
I will tell you, the broad philosophy is notation is not music. Notation is a phonetic language. And I want to always go on record and say, I have no problem with notation. I don't denigrate it. People who read well do well with it. The problem is when you're only reading and you take away the sheet music and you're sitting in front of a piece of furniture, that's bad. So when I looked at that and I looked at how things came easily to me, I had to reverse engineer how I was thinking. I realized that we don't teach music as a language. And everybody I've ever asked in the entire world, hey, do you think music is a language? No one's ever said no. If we're going to teach music as a language, then we have to look at the mechanics of a language. So when you grow up, the first words you say, mama, or whatever it is. And then everything that you learn from there, every book you read, every song, every person that speaks, every colloquialism, everything you learn, all the vocabulary is in your brain, but the act of speaking is improvisatory. You don't pull a script out of your pocket to say, hi, how do you do to anybody? So if improvisation is the main mechanic of a language skill, and we're going to teach music as a language skill, then that has to be a big part of the way that we start And the way that I was started in lessons is, here's the sheet music. Every good boy does fine. And there was no place for that. And at Musicians Institute, it was very similar in all the theory and the harmonic minor and all this stuff. And none of it was sinking in. I'd have people come into counseling crying, and I'd sit with them and I'd talk to them and I'd say, look, let's really figure out what's going on here. And it's very easy to get, especially younger students, into improvising and into singing and scat singing and stuff like that. And to me, as a teacher, I need to do two things. One, give the correct information and the whole picture, but two, increase the curiosity. Because if you're curious, you will dig, you will find, you will go, you will, search.
And do you think over time, Robbie, and this is coming from someone who also can't sight read or remotely go close to it, do you think over time the necessity of charts in most areas of music has actually lessened? So I understand there are things like stage musicals and so on where you can argue charts are still pivotal. But do you think it's lessened over time or overall?
I mean, outside of classical music and outside of, music for film and TV, and musicals maybe, when do you go see a band, rock, soul, funk, whatever, that all has charts up on stage? I mean, you really don't. So the idea of being able to read charts, I mean, I came full circle because when I was finishing up at Musicians Institute, these albums that I was working on for myself, it's all orchestrated and I wanted to do it myself. So I took classes, continuing education requirements at MI in orchestration. I took classes in everything, Afro-Cuban drumming. I really took a lot of classes to enrich myself, but then I worked with great musicians who taught me better how to chart. So now I can write great string charts. And I've also, the past couple decades, I've been playing out here in a thing called the Valley Ragtime Stomp, which is on hiatus right now because we lost our place. But that was really important because I started to learn standards, which I never did growing up. So it was all about music from before the 50s. So I had to really dig and find tunes that I could get with. So even now, I'm learning stuff, not just by ear or by chords, but off of sheet music and charts to keep my skills up and to learn new things. I just got the Charleston under my fingers and just working through things because it interests me and I love it and it's fun. But I also in that pursuit of making myself better at things that I want to be better at. And if I can chart for strings, now I can chart for horns and I'm working with that, but that's not concert pitch. So, so all these albums that I'm doing forced me to make charts and then to look at my own songs in a way I never had, which is, there's, a bar of 5 there. And I didn't even think about that, because I'm just playing the piano. So it was really important, but going full circle back, charts are not what I think are of main importance now for most music. And I think especially in DJ culture and EDM and all that kind of stuff, there's not even musicianship is necessary, but I know great musicians who can read charts amazing. I know unbelievable musicians who can't read a chart at all. But I think that there's something to be said for educating oneself and, keeping your skill set wide.
Robbie, you gave us a word before, curiosity. And just listening to you give that last answer, that I can see that curiosity still burns within you. You're constantly learning and listening and growing. Oh, yeah. How do you pass that gift of curiosity on to your students?
I like to think in the realm of Dick Van Dyke and Willy Wonka, and you have to be like exuding. I mean, it has to be coming out of your pores. And when I had taught to some elementary and charter school classes a couple of years back, and that was really instructive and eye-opening, but I always was getting them into the music and talking about the stories. And when I think back on the teachers that I had, the ones that were the most exciting were the ones that would, jump up on the desk and raise the imaginary sword and bring it to life. And so I wanted to always give people that excitement and sharing music and here and listen to this and let's talk about this and let's watch this and look at this guy play and listen to what this person did. And so you don't know what's going to be somebody else's, spirit animal. It might not be Richard T. or it might not be Elton John, but you also have to recognize that everybody's going to have a different level of interest, and some people may be intrinsically uncurious. And what can you do? But I think everybody can be made to be a little bit more curious, let alone a lot. And then who knows what can happen?
That's right. No,
Keep
well
digging.
put. I mean, all this talk about charts, for a lot of us growing up in the late 70s and 80s into the 90s, if we weren't reading charts, the equivalent of charts for us were Keyboard magazine, because at least you could check out the gear and also learn a lot of great theory and other stuff as well. So obviously you were a senior contributor at Keyboard magazine. Tell us about how that relationship developed. And obviously Keyboard magazine is no more. I know it sort of sits within the music
It
radar
actually
side,
developed
but
on
yeah.
a dare. I used to go to the NAMM show all the time, which I don't anymore. And back in 98, I was on an early tour, young guy out on the road, and I fell on a piece of glass and it severed all the tendons to my finger and I had to get operated on, and I finished the tour left-handed. It was a wild experience. And I was at the NAMM show and I was talking to Musician magazine, and I ended up writing a piece for them on what happens when you get injured on the road without insurance. And then I went up to Keyboard and I was like, you guys should have this and this and this and this. And they're like, well, why don't you write it? And I'm like, me? I'd love to. So I ended up doing a thing once a month where I would bring out an old record and tell people about it and why they should listen to it, and got to share a lot of things that I love. But then I got, when I got to interview people and get into their studio space or go see the show and talk to them on stage, I have no shortage of questions. So whether I'm in George Duke's studio or, Devo's studio or wherever I am, I mean, I have a million things I can ask. And I got to interview Donald Fagen once, and I had a half an hour, and it ended up going for 45 minutes because we just got wrapped up in a conversation. Because I asked him, not is there gas in the car or whatever people would ask him, but I said, the Night Fly was set in the 50s and Kamakiriya is set in the future. Do I detect some sort of sci-fi timeline? And we got into talking about science fiction and Alfred Bester and how he thought Heinlein was a fascist and all this great stuff. So, that time at Keyboard magazine was amazing, but so much of it was just me saying, hey, what if? Hey, how about this? Hey, how about that? And the next thing you know, I'm up at 5 a.m. getting a phoner from Steve Winwood going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm talking to Steve Winwood.
That's amazing. And which editors did you work under, Robbie? I haven't gone back through my archive.
Oh my. Well, all of them, Mitch Gallagher, Ernie Rideout, Steve Fortner.
Yeah.
Maybe Dominic. I mean, I have to go back and see who was there
great
first.
Editors. Yeah.
But I know who was there last.
Yeah.
And that was a sad ending. I mean, I love that magazine. Now the archives aren't even available online.
No, there's been so many chats over the years about, I think there was Musines were talking about digitizing the whole archive. I'm yet to see that happen yet. It so needs to happen. I don't know how we make it happen.
Historical
but it needs to happen.
And really interesting information, great articles, great information charts, different things. I mean, should all be available.
Even digitizing all the plastic records. I'd love to see all that stuff.
I do remember those.
Yes. So no, thanks, Robbie, for that. Yeah, over to you, Paul.
Well, I was just reflecting on the fact that when one reads your writing, Robbie, and I really encourage our listeners to do so, and we'll put some links in the show notes in relation to that, I get a sense of real love for and care for language and words. And you actually started off talking about music as a language.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in, as someone who has obviously written professionally in terms of words on a page, but also writing words for music. And you mentioned earlier, like one word, a rhyme can change the meaning or an interpretation of a line. I'm just fascinated in your perspective of that, and then maybe the juxtaposition, writing prose, writing songs. Your thoughts on that and how that links?
I will tell you, I've always been a voracious reader. I've always had a bookshelf and books around me. My mom dropped me at the library. I mean, I could not stop reading. So a lot of the writers who affected me early on, whether it was Roald Dahl's book growing up, reading the different Danny Champion of the World and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Lord of the Rings, which I'm currently reading out loud to my son after a long journey of reading kind of in the last 100 pages of The Return of the King. I just always loved literature. I'd say poetry, Charles Bukowski was a very big touchstone for me because I hadn't read somebody that wrote like that. And he's still, I don't want to use the term spirit animal, but he's still one of those people that I can get into his writing, and really there's such a raw humanity in there. But I read a lot of fiction, read a lot of nonfiction, but I love great writing. I love great turn of phrase, and I love language. I speak Spanish as well, and that's a fun language to engage in. And I've written some music in Spanish and whatnot, but really it's just a love of language, a love of words, a love of rhymes, a love of tumbling things around and turning things. I love writing lyrics because when you're trying to truncate a thought into a single line and make that line kill, you really got to boil it down. When you look at hip hop, it's more like, okay, we need 2,000 lines, stretch, stretch, stretch. And there's great rappers who have amazing skills, in that respect. I've done some hip hop stuff in my past and written rap, and that's a different kind of a challenge because it is tons of space to fill. While a song, especially the chorus of a song, you're really getting down to like a one thought that really transcends, I love a good turn of a phrase. I love just hearing somebody sing something that means something. And I love songs as delivery systems for thought, because I think you sing a song, you're not conscious so much of what you're singing. And some of those thoughts can really seep into the brain. I love asking questions in my songs because then the listener asks the question to themselves and your brain circles around on that. Some songs are great for singing out loud together. When Bob Marley wrote Get Up, Stand Up for Your Rights, nobody went around saying that. And then there's everybody saying it out loud to themselves and each other. So the power of a song beyond any book to me is a killer delivery system, which is why I keep writing songs and working at it.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. A wonderful perspective. You remind me of, I read an interview with Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer, and yeah. He said something very similar to what you just said. He said, writing a short story is so much harder than writing a novel because you've got to place each word like behind the reader's ear or in their pocket. So you've got to choose your words carefully. So I think that aligns with your philosophy on writing a song. You've got a short amount of time to really get maximum power with those words.
Right. And then sometimes you might need a filler word. And again, it changes the meaning, or sometimes you're looking for a rhyme. You find the rhyme, you back write the line, and then you've said something that you didn't intend. So that's why it's hard. If you're listening to my songs, it's not like I'm saying like I did this and this happened to me. It's thoughts and things swirling around. 'Cause ultimately, I think the songwriter wants their songs to fit into the lives of the listener in a way where I take myself out of the way. When Elton John's on stage singing How Wonderful Life Is Because You're in the World, he's thinking about what's a catering afterwards. Everybody else in the audience, the you is something different. Their lover, their friend, their God, their dog, their parent, whatever. So I love the idea of a song, and especially the lyric, being open enough to different interpretations and multiple interpretations.
Yeah, wonderful. And look, speaking of delivery systems for songs, we are, of course, all keyboard players and keyboard nerds, us people on this podcast. So we need to ask you, what are your favorite keyboards at the moment?
So we're off screen where you can't see. I have a Hohner D6 clavinet and Fender Rhodes 73. I had a Wurlitzer burned in the fire. I had a Mini Moog burned in the fire. I had a lot of the synths that you'll hear on the records coming up. 98% of them are in the program Reason, which is the program that I record in. I love Reason. It's been an amazing tool. I work so quick in it, saving templates and different things, but it's really become such an amazing tool. I'm surprised more people don't use it out there, but I'm going to be the guy out there showing people what you can do with it. But all this synths internally, and I know a little bit enough about synthesis to tweak and, not just use the sounds that come with it. But I think it's a great program. And that's been the bulk of what I've done. After the fire, a friend of mine at IK Multimedia sent me this little iRig keyboard. And that's what I've been using ever since. That's been my interface. So all the synths that I played, everything except for one song on the current record, Sunday Driver, the solo I did on a little micro Korg.
Oh, yeah.
Because it had a sound I could not get anywhere else. And I was really going for that Steve Winwood, Arc of a Diver, Prophet kind of sound. And it just like literally the defaults, I was like, I just have to use this. So I did. So there you go.
No, that's amazing. And we have a standard question that sends shivers of dread through everyone. It's the Desert Island Discs question, Robbie. So what are 5 albums that, if you have to pick them, that you couldn't live without?
I'm so glad you asked. And I'm going to go back to albums that opened me up when I was young. The first one, Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow. I did come prepared. Max Middleton, clavinet, Rhodes. Amazing record, but also musically amazing. Every instrument George Martin produced and did the string arrangements. I mean, this is an all-time Desert Island disc for me. I still listen to this and still marvel at it and groove to it. Again, my parents grew me up on Elton John. So we listened to like greatest hits and some of the records. But once I started acquiring my own, this was the Bible. 11-17-70. If you're a piano player, not a keyboard player, piano player, and I am, and I should say my main piano is a Kawai upright that I have, which I love. I've been a Kawai player for a long time. My main stage keyboard is an older Kawai MP piano. But this album, Take Me to the Pilot, I mean, every riff and lick that he's doing on here, this is a wealth. If there's a piano player out there watching and they're like, oh, I've never heard of that record. Run, Don't Walk, right? So with Billy Joel, I could bring out both 52nd Street and The Stranger, but I probably would say that Songs from the Attic, where he went back and did his earlier stuff, left an equally big mark. I mean, I'll always love these records, and Zanzibar, Rosalinda's Eyes, all that. I mean, they're ingrained in my psyche, but the Songs from the Attic was cool. It was live, seeing the lights go out on Broadway, all that kind of stuff, all the early songs, that really opened me up into the Billy Joel world. So I'd say for Billy, that magic period, that was big for me. Third, this is not a record most people would pick. Crusaders, this is a record called Images. I got this on cassette for no reason other than I just picked it up. And I probably listened to this record 1,000 times. I love it. And it's not one of their best known records. And actually the second song on the record, when I made mixed CDs, I would skip it because it's like a snoozer. It should have been the last one on the record, you know, like Diamond Dust on Blow by Blow. But this one, or Dust on Arc of a Diver. But this album, Joe Sample, all the plan, everything about it, just I come back to it. I know all the sax lines, I can sing them. And I'm going to give you one that's way out of the box, but to me, this was one of the most important records of my youth, not just for the record, but the movie as well.
Yeah.
Much lambasted, much derided, but the greatest Beatles indoctrination tool ever made for children. I guarantee you, you put this movie and this album on for kids, they will love the Beatles forever. So, a lot of people when this movie came out, evidently didn't like it. They thought it was cheesy. Who knew the 70s cheesy? And they thought it was making fun of the Beatles and whatnot. But when you look at this record, when you look at the credits on it, I mean, George Martin produced, Jeff Emmerich engineered. You have the Tower Power horns. You have basically, okay, so I'm not going to go into the whole story, but when Jeff Beck did Blow by Blow, he came over to the States without the rhythm section, Phil Chen and Richard Bailey. And he ended up getting a band together with Bernard Purdy on drums and one of my favorite all-time bass players, Wilbur Bascombe, on bass. After that was all done, he had gone back to England, was playing with this band Hummingbird. George Martin called, said, hey, I'm doing this Beatles movie, and I want you to come over. And I got Bernard, and I got Wilbur, and I want you to bring Robert Hawaii, your guitar player in Hummingbird. So the band on this Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band soundtrack is the American Blow by Blow touring band with a different guitar player. And in the credits on this, Jeff Beck's in there, and Larry Carlton's in there. It's like, you know, and Peter Frampton and the Bee Gees. It's like, what is there not to like? But I love those versions. I love it. You know, that movie opened me to Aerosmith. That movie opened me to Earth, Wind and Fire. Super important. And any kid that grows up with that, as my kids did, just falls in love with it. So anybody out there who's some dude in their 60s or 70s who's still hating on that movie, cut it.
I think I couldn't agree more, Robbie. And I think that's a great way to encapsulate our chat today, because, I mean, your passion for that movie and your passion just for music and curiosity, as you mentioned it, is obviously infectious. And I have no doubt has had an impact on a bunch of students and other people throughout the years. And we certainly appreciate the time we spent with you. We can't thank you enough for that. And we're looking forward to seeing, well, as you know, another 8 albums to come this year, and looking forward to seeing what comes beyond that.
Yes. Anybody out there who's into music, I hope you will tune in, because it's not just one thing. It's kind of a little something for everybody. So I'm really looking forward to you guys hearing it. And I'd love to circle back towards the end of the year and see what you thought.
And there we have it. So, yeah, look, that was a really fun chat, Paul. Robbie certainly had lots of fascinating perspectives, and I just love his perspective on educating. And times have certainly changed with music, and I think we've got to adapt.
No doubt about it. And I love the passion that clearly came through. You know, he was talking about the teacher that, you know, metaphorically jumps up on the table and swings the invisible sword, is the one who inspires him. And I feel like he has so much energy and enthusiasm and passion for his education that I would love to be a student in his class. So I'm sure it'll be a wonderful experience.
Absolutely. And look, I know we sideswiped into Keyboard Magazine a little bit, but given the majority of our audience of a mature age, sort of over the age of 35, most of us remember Keyboard Magazine, and some of us were there from the very start. I wasn't, but I was there from sort of the early 80s. It was such an iconic part of all our lives as keyboard players, and I know I had the privilege only twice of writing articles. I remember just pitching Ernie Wright out over and over, and finally him agreeing to giving me a go and just doing 2 articles for Keyboard Magazine and thinking, well, I've died and gone to heaven, let alone someone like Robbie, who was a senior contributor, who was, doing a lot more work. It was just an amazing part of our lives.
Well, I think for a lot of keyboard players of our vintage and similar, David, Keyboard Magazine was very, very formative for a lot of us. And times have changed now. So we can all be writers for Keyboard Magazine in our own blogs and websites. And so, listeners and viewers, that's a reminder to make sure that you get onto. There's more to us than just the podcast. Get onto our website. And David's written some really wonderful articles there. And there's all sorts of other little contributions that you can check out.
Yes, Keyboard Magazine. You've written a couple. That's right. You've written a couple. And we're now doing the Weekend Warrior profile. So if you just like even checking out fellow players, we've got about 7 or 8 of them and many more to come. Once we get a chance, we've had a lot of responses. So it is worth checking out. So that's keyboardchronicles.com. But otherwise, thank you for listening, and a huge thanks to our gold and silver supporters. So particular shout outs to the wonderful Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you as always, Tammy. The brilliant Mike at Midnight Mastering. I know you've mentioned before, Paul, you've been working with Mike.
Hey, we've nearly finished our project as we record this, and it's coming up really good. So I can't recommend Mike. 2 things. One, the quality of what he's doing is wonderful. But the second thing, he's very easy to deal with and communicates really well. He gets onto things quickly. So very professional in his demeanour as well as his output. So I can't recommend him highly enough, David.
Oh, excellent. The brilliant Dewi Evans from the sunny land of Wales, as I'd like to say each episode now. Shout out to you, Dewi. And last but definitely not least, Dave Bryce and the team at the musicplayer.com forums. We always love hanging there, and there's lots. And Paul, I'm going on a road trip tomorrow to drive about an hour and a half north of where I am to pick up my Viscount Legend 1 organ, and I'm excited.
Hey, so you need to, I don't know what we need to do. Are we doing a live stream or whether we're dovetailing into one of these little chats we have in the podcast, but we need a review.
Yeah, I have to do a review. Maybe first gig. I've got a gig coming up in about a month where I will try and bring it and do a bit of a mini review and retour of the legends. And it is wasted on me. I'm not just being modest. I'm not much of an organ player, and I feel bad because there are only a few came to Australia, and I managed to, just by fluke, my music shop managed to get one. So, very pleased to. And, we'll do that.
But will it come to Adelaide? So for those who don't know, David's band and my band, we're going to play a show together, which, that's not as easy as it sounds, because we live 1,000 miles apart. So we're going to do a double headline show, and I want to know, is that coming? Is the Viscount coming?
Probably not, because I'm not driving and I'm flying. Yeah. I think I'm going to risk the Modi X on the flight. I'm not sure I'll risk the Viscount.
Probably what I would do. Yeah. That's probably what I would do. But it's a shame.
So, no, thank you all out there for listening. Do drop us a line anytime at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. We are on all the socials. We're on Substack. We're on Patreon, where we appreciate your support as well. But, look, keep on playing. And until next time, we look forward to speaking.